Don't have to tell you that it's stage 2 load shedding. I'm sure you also know it's going to be like this until at least Saturday morning, 5 a.m. For the usual reasons from Eskom, there's been a problem with certain units, particularly, it seems, at Unit 3 at Medupi. At the same time, the unit of the University of Stellenbosch is now conducting a study into where we need more grid capacity when it comes to renewable energy. In other words, do we need to put more infrastructure and more cables to get power from solar power stations and windmills to the national grid? Where do we need to put them? Professor Sampson Mamphweli is the director at the Stellenbosch University Centre for Renewable and Sustainable Energy. Professor Mamphweli, good afternoon to you. Well, the load shedding we have at the moment, the usual problems, a series of breakdowns at certain power stations. Are you expecting more of this type of load shedding, if I can call it that, throughout the year?
Good evening, Stephen and the viewers. Yeah, the current state of affairs is very concerning, well, especially if you look at the reasons that Eskom has given. Issues around Medupi and Kusile. I listened to some of what Eskom said about the boiler tube failures, for instance, at Kusile. That for me is very, very concerning, and Eskom has also highlighted that because that power station is quite new. We all know that it was built very much out of budget, both Medupi and Kusile. And for them to start to have failures at this point in time, which Eskom has also indicated that they're still doing research to establish what are the causes, because these power stations are quite new. It's very concerning for me. We shouldn't be experiencing such kind of failures, especially in those two power stations. I understand the breakdowns that we're having in other power stations, because most of these power stations are old. They were not properly maintained, because whenever we talk about the age of the power plant, we also need to look at whether that power plant was properly maintained or not, because it's not necessarily the age that matters, it's how the power plant was maintained, looking at the various maintenance regimes. So we all know that most of these power stations were not properly maintained in the past. That's why we're having these serious breakdowns. Breakdowns that go up to 16,000 megawatts at a time. That is very concerning for me. We need to do something quickly. I know and understand that government is doing something, but we need to speed up some of the processes.
It seems, I mean, we were hoping that perhaps there'll be more embedded generation coming on stream or on steam by now. That hasn't happened.
Yes, we have a number of projects that are starting to come live. We have some projects from the Big Willow 5 that are starting to come live now. We are expecting about 1,400 megawatts from embedded generation that will come in live at a later stage. We are expecting about 800 megawatts from the risk mitigation procurement that was done alongside the power ships that we don't know whether they will be able to dock and provide us with power. But we guaranteed that 800 megawatts out of that 2,000 odd megawatts will be coming live quite soon. So those initiatives are quite welcome. But if you look at what will come live and what is and the rate of our breakdown, you can see that that what is coming live is not going to solve load shedding immediately, or at least this year, until we do away with the aging infrastructure and then implement the renewable energy program quite speedily.
You've been looking at our grid, and this would be for renewable energy. Where do we need to put more grid infrastructure at the moment? In a way, it needs to follow the generating capacity wherever we build that.
So we've conducted a study that's looking at the siting of renewable energy projects for grid support, basically, looking at what can be done now. And some of the things that we have established is that we have enough grid capacity. For instance, in Limpopo and in Mpumalanga, some of the grid will be freed in Mpumalanga area when we do when we decommission some of the power stations. I'm sorry, my video may not be that clear. There is load shedding here, and our inverter is kicking in the next few minutes. So, okay, there it is. So we've looked at Mpumalanga, we've looked at Limpopo. Basically, we've looked at the entire country. So in the past, we had a situation where most of the renewable energy projects were situated in the Northern Cape, if it's solar energy, parts of the Eastern Cape and all that, if it's wind energy. And that is mainly because they become economically viable when they are in the areas where there's the most resource. But what our study has established is that there is not enough grid capacity in the Northern Cape, for instance, and Eskom has confirmed that as well. So what we're looking at is with the available grid in Limpopo and in Mpumalanga and parts of Gauteng, for instance, can't we then locate some of this renewable energy, especially solar energy systems, in those provinces and take advantage of the existing grid and then maybe come up with some form of incentives, because they will be a little bit expensive if they are located in those areas as opposed to where they are located where there is enough resource or more resources. So we need to look at how do we incentivize IPPs to be located in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, and parts of Gauteng, for instance, generating using solar energy. So that's the essence of our study. We have shared the study with Eskom. Eskom is looking very seriously into the study. They acknowledge the importance of the study. We are still going ahead with part 2 of the study, because part 1 of the study was basically to look at where is the grid and how we can locate these projects. So part 2 will go to an extent of looking at what will be the cost implications if we have to locate those projects in the particular areas where we are recommending that they should be located.
So we know, for example, that probably the best sun in the country is in the Northern Cape, but most of the infrastructure that would allow that electricity to be transmitted to the grid is in Mpumalanga. But, I mean, the sun in Mpumalanga, is it that different to the Northern Cape? I never thought I'd have this conversation. But does it really matter where we put solar power projects? Wind, I imagine, does matter. You probably want to put it near the coast. But in terms of solar power, does it sort of matter?
Yes. So in terms of solar power, it matters because we look at mainly the sun hours and what we call the useful fraction of the spectrum. So the Northern Cape has got the best useful fraction of the spectrum in terms of the conversion from the sun to energy, to electricity. And they also have more sun hours than Mpumalanga and Limpopo, for instance. But if you compare those to countries like Germany, where they are using a lot of solar energy, I mean, you move around Germany, almost every house has got solar panels on their roof. If you compare our solar radiation to that of Germany, for instance, Limpopo still and Mpumalanga and Gauteng, they still do much better, way much better than Germany. So which basically means that the issue then becomes the cost factor, to say a project located in the Northern Cape, for instance, will produce more electricity because it will have more time, more sun hours, and they have the best in terms of the useful fraction of the spectrum, whereas the project located in the other provinces that I've mentioned will be a little bit expensive. That's why we're looking at how do we then come up with incentives so that such projects can be economically viable, or they can be able to compete well with the projects that are located in the provinces such as the Northern Cape, where they've got the best sun. But I must mention that places like the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape are fast running out of grid capacity. Eskom needs to invest about 180 billion rands to strengthen the grid in those particular areas. And as things stand, Eskom is still struggling with the other debt, big debt that we know. So there's that opportunity for us to say, while we're still servicing the other debt, what are the other options? Can't we then go into the IPP space and advertise specifically for those other provinces, as opposed to advertising for the entire country, and then some projects become more cost-effective than the others.
Professor Sampson Mamphweli, as always, thanks very much indeed, Head of the Renewable Sustainable Energy Department at the University of Stellenbosch. Well,